Hey guys, thank you so much for coming. So just a quick announcement, this is actually being live streamed through our Communication Design Department Facebook page. So as you are watching both of the panels, you can participate in these panels by asking questions on our live feed on the Facebook page. Everybody have part of the Facebook page? Yes? All right, so ask lots of questions, please, all right? I'm going to monitor this in case they come up. And I just want to introduce you, actually, because
Okay.
so this is Dr. Shmika Mitchell. She is visiting us from SUNY Rockland. She moderates the panel discussion. Could you tell them a little bit about yourself?
I went to Brooklyn Tech. Brooklyn Tech. So I'm a Brooklyn Tech alum, class of '94. So we go way back. I teach English, teach comics. I'm a member of Women in Comics. Thank you for coming. I'm going to start here. My right, your right. My right, your right. Right? Okay. With Marguerite Dubai. Her first major comic, The Hookah Girl and Other True Stories, is an autobiography about Palestinian Americans. It was awarded 2 grants. The cultural differences being felt between Arab and American cultures heavily informs her work. She strives to combine comics with academia, something that dovetailed into her work on A Voyage to Panchakut, a historical fiction graphic novel about the 7th century Silk Road, which is due out next year.
Yes.
She is a freelance illustrator and has worked with such publications as the School Library Journal, Mizna, and Takata Magazine, among others. She also regularly contributes to the, I like this title, Electric Intifada, the Journal of Palestinian Studies, and Al-Shabaka. Marguerite, goodbye. Next, we have Regine Sawyer, Queen Regine, who's a New York City native and is the owner, writer, and creator for Lock It Down Productions Publications, which publishes the comic series The Rippers and Eating Vampires. Am I missing one? I Switch. I knew there was one. I'm missing. That's Eating Vampires. Right. She is also the coordinator and founder of Women in Comics New York City Collective International, in which you're all wing. She has worked in the comics industry for almost a decade, and she is a professionally trained culinary artist who makes delicious red velvet snacks. So I gotta say, if you ever... And the cheese puffs.
And I was trained right here in City Tech.
City Tech alumni. That's right, an alumna of City Tech. She didn't bring any snacks today. And next, we have La Doña Laura Alvarez, who was born in Valencia, Spain. She completed an MA in Fine Arts in Spain and England. She has been a graphic designer for more than 15 years. She teaches and collaborates with different Bronx organizations such as the New York Botanical Garden, the Bronx Council of the Arts, the New York City Department of Parks and Recreation, and the New York Public Library. She has won various awards and is the co-founder, vice president, and COO, aka she's the person in charge, of BX Arts, Bronx Arts Factory, a nonprofit organization whose mission is to make art accessible to everyone in the Bronx. Next, we have Madame Micheline Hess, who is a New York City native who you started your professional comic book career in the early 90s with Milestone as a colorist. She has several creator-owned works such as the fantasy adventure comic book series, there it is, Malice in Oven Land, published by Rosarian Publishing, The Anansi Kids and the All Saints Day Adventure, and they're both children's books, right? And the children's book, The Island Cats of Kungaree. In addition to being an independent comic book creator, Micheline is also an accomplished digital painter, with her work shown nationally at various art shows. Madam Micheline. And then we have La Otra Doña. Sarah Woolley Gomez. Okay, I just want to make sure I'm okay. Sarah Woolley Gomez is an award-winning illustrator and visual artist living and working in BK. In the BK. That's here. Okay. She has worked on a variety of exciting projects for clients, including Scholastic Random House, Parallax Press, and has worked on 2 recent book projects, Los Pirineos, and Charlotte in the Quiet Place. No, wait. Okay. Charlotte in the Quiet Place, and then this one is.
Just came out.
Oh,
The 9th of April.
oh, the
in
9th
Los
of
Pirineos
April.
series.
Oh, okay. See, I didn't even see that one yet. The 9th of April, which was just last week.
Just last week, yep.
She also had the pleasure of creating innovative costume pieces, puppets, and props for film and theatrical performance. Credits include the feature film Monkey Bone and Vital Children's Theater in New York City. Sarah is currently an associate professor in the Department of Communication Design here at CUNY City Tech. This is our panel, y'all. So my first question, the title of this panel is Culture and Comics, Comics and Culture. So much to say. How does your work function as a platform for cultural commentary and critique? Thank you. I usually ask these very big questions. And everybody's like, dang, it's like an oral exam.
No warm up.
So, no warm up, We get in and then we'll right into it. We get right into it, yeah. You repeat that question. Because the title of the panel is Culture and Comics, how does your work function as a platform for cultural commentary and critique?
I would say that my work is who I am. So whatever I do in art is trying to understand my world and the world that surrounds me. So culture is going to be everywhere where I do anything is going to be about culture or about what's around me, and that's the platform that you have and to project what you want in life and what you believe. I believe in ecology, so I'm always about ecology. I believe in coffee. I just made a book about coffee. So. I think it's like, if you're a true artist to yourself, you are what you draw. You draw what you are. Like an actor, you act how you are, or whatever that word is.
Okay. But then you're also a muralist, right? So I think of mural being from Harlem and the Bronx, right? Murals for me is like graffiti light. So then a lot of times these artists are saying something about what's going on around it. So is it possible with some of the work that you do, people can tell what mood you're in that day? Or how you're feeling about a headline?
Yeah, well, in November I did a mural together with a friend of mine in Rivington Street.
Okay.
Actually, we came out of the Bronx because we thought it was a good cause, and it's Mamie Reynoso. She died last summer at the same time that 2 other girls died, one in Queens, one in Manhattan, and those were all over the place. And she was nowhere. No one covered her story because she was a woman of color, a Latina, and they found her floating in the river. But still, who did hear about it? No one. So we decided to go out and we made a mural that is her face and me and a lot of flowers because she was very creative and into art, and it's been there for a while, and we've had a lot of calls from people saying, oh, we just learned about this, from your mural. Can you get us in touch with someone else? So there's a lot of ways to promote something besides pretty.
Anyone use it for it too?
I would agree with what Laura says. I think in my case, my art echoes a lot, or myself echoes a lot of my art. It's obvious in the Hookah Girl because it's autobiographical in a lot of ways, and it reflects Arab culture, and that kind of thing. In Panjikan, even though it's historical fiction, I still, the reason why I made it historical fiction specifically was because I wanted to comment on issues, specifically feminist issues, that we're dealing still with now, but I wanted to put it under this gaze of this historical veneer, so that people won't think of it as like this immediate, holy crap, like people tend to think of historical history books in fantasy and sci-fi a little bit differently, and so I wanted to disrupt it a little bit. So in some ways, even my Panjikat book is a commentary on modern culture and modern ideas. I just kind of toned it down a little bit.
Can you say more about the Hookah Girl in terms of responses to or criticisms of perceptions of Arab women?
So the thing about the Hookah Girl is that I do talk about my family in the book, and my family, like my dad, I talk about my dad, and he's a sexist guy, but I never meant it to be. The problem when you're talking about a non-white culture is that people look at this one thing and then they're like, oh, that's representative of the entire.
Yes,
I understand. So, a lot of times people would come up to me and say, I actually had other Palestinians come up to me and say, why did you write this story? Now everyone's going to think other Palestinians are like this. When the truth of the matter is that I'm not, obviously I don't think that. I never meant the story to be a representation of an entire culture. It's just, this is how my family rolls. I'm just trying to tell a full story. And that's, good and bad. There are positives too in the story. Like every family,
And lots of funny moments.
And lots of
irony.
Exactly. So to answer your question.
Do you find that there are Arab girls, Arab American girls, perhaps might look to the Hookah Girl as a platform for inspiration, breaking out of certain traditional norms?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. I hope so. I mean, not that traditional norms are. I'm not saying traditional norms are necessarily bad. Just to say that I'm hoping that people see it as a platform to speak creatively, more so than breaking out of. I don't know how to say it. I'm sorry, but necessarily breaking out of traditional norms, more like seeing it and being like, I can also do something like this. There aren't really a lot of, for example, Arab American cartoonists. There's very few. And so I partially wanted to do it to say, hey, here's a way for us to tell our stories, here's a way for us to get the word out there.
Yeah.
And so I partially wanted people to look at it and say, like, hey, here's a way to just get the word out too. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think because of the popularization that we have now with hookah, the hookah lounges everywhere, right? And I remember I was in Cairo last October, and then I've been to Dubai and Bahrain, and definitely hookah is not as special as normal, right?
Yeah.
But we've turned it into this thing of Arabesque,
Right.
And so when you call it the title being Hookah Girl, it was really kind of this jab at the idea of this exotification,
Yeah.
Orientalist kind of gaze.
Yeah, no, I definitely, over the years when I've shown it at shows, I've definitely had people like, oh, hookah, let's smoke a hookah, and then they open it and they're like, oh.
Yeah, right.
Like, it doesn't really have to do with hookah. But you're right, you're totally right.
Yeah. How has it worked in a reflection?
I mean, for me, Mouse and Overland was a response to a lot of different things, but the primary driving response was to the fact that when I was a kid, there were no black girls in comics. There just weren't. I think there was like Valerie from Josie and the Pussycats, and that wasn't until like 1980 something. And I loved her, but I mean, it was like a desert.
She was a little silent though, too.
Yeah, she was pretty silent. She was smart, which was nice, and you know, but yeah, she wasn't like a leading.
She's fairly untapped.
Character, yeah. So, I mean, that's kind of where a lot of that stems from. I wanted a character that could show young girls that you could be very ordinary looking, and you could be in school, and that's cool, and you could, you know, have your friends and your nerdy things that you like, and that's fine. And then you could also, you know, get sucked into your oven while you're cleaning it and end up in this other world and try to figure your way out. So it was really more about kind of bringing a lot of the fantastical and things, and trying to kind of stay away from a lot of the stereotypes that I encountered in comics over the years. With the Anansi Kids, which I conveniently don't have here, it takes place in the West Indies, and that was really an attempt to kind of dive deep into West Indian culture and the stories my mother used to tell me growing up about the Sukuyon, the skinwalkers, and things like that. And once again, there was like a female character who was kind of the lead. She was like the strongest character, you know, and they used Anansi stories to kind of try to figure out different challenges in life. And so I you know, up until quite recently, I haven't seen too many comics for kids that really celebrated that. So I thought it was really important to try and kind of elevate it. And so kids can see, like you have your own heroes. Like Naruto is great, it's awesome. You know, anime is wonderful. I've been watching it for years. But you know, like we have our own stuff too, and you can totally like be into it. It's deep, it's rich, you know, and there's lots of stories and lots of interesting characters, and you can, you know, shape that in many different ways. So. Yeah.
Now the Anansi Kids is more like kids on an adventure.
Yeah, it's kind of like it's like
Right?
Scooby-Doo without the
Yeah.
dog. It's kind of like the mystery, you know, the mystery solving part. And yeah, they're on the island of St. Vincent, and so many of the locations are actual places. And you know, I mentioned breadfruit quite a bit because that's like one of my favorite things over there. And then there's some of the different nuances of how you trap a Sukuyon, you know, and how you find one and things like that. So I had a really good time. And then in the back of the comic, there's also, because the Sukuyon that they track down, spoilers, lives in an abandoned sugar mill. I talked a little bit about sugar mills and how they pertain to, you know, slavery, and you know how they were used, what their original function was based around. So yeah, it was really, I thought it's both entertaining and a little bit of edutainment.
But the primary audience is going to be kids who are from similar backgrounds, or is it a window book intentionally, or is it? Do you understand window book versus a mirror? So in children's literature, often the books that are mirror books reflect the reader, and window books teach the reader about another culture or experience. So something like the Anansi Kids, is it safe to presume?
I think it could be a little bit of both.
A little bit of both,
Yeah.
and it's a window and a mirror book at the
Yeah.
same time. So is there like a glossary in the back on like, this is what breadfruit is?
Yeah, there's a glossary in the back, and there's like a character sheet in the
Kind of
back,
pick
and,
the
you know, parents actually, I was selling it at the Brooklyn Book Fair a couple of years ago, and this kid came back and was like, my mother wants you to sign this, you know, and the mother was like, you know, something on it, you know, so a lot of ways the parents kind of get more of it than the kids do, but I think they also want their kids to kind of be familiar with that, because all those stories tend to kind of disappear, you know,
Folklore.
so, yeah.
Is anybody here familiar with some of these folklore tales? Oh, okay. So then, are there varieties to the folk tales, or is it like every island has its own version, or is it pretty consistent?
I mean, I find that some of the, when you look at like glossaries and you look across different like Afro-Caribbean culture and things like that, you find that some of the creatures and things are actually very similar.
Okay.
But then sometimes they'll have different names, so there'll be different, you know, nuances about them that are changed. I mean, I only just dealt with one one creature for that particular story. So yeah, I'm not sure how I would take on the rest. There's a surprising amount of characters out there, but I worry about sometimes using the wrong character in the wrong place, and I don't want to like annoy people. Yeah, so that's another thing.
And then with Malice in Ovenland, is she supposed to be a Cinderella type who's cleaning the house, or is she doing her chores?
She's doing her chores. She's doing her chores. All of her
teaching
friends
responsibility.
Yeah, teaching responsibility. You know, I mean, I was joking with my mom the other day. I showed her a page when there's a page when the character is taking these 2 jugs of water to the local community garden, and I was like, "Yeah, this is what you made me do one summer, remember?" And so because the water, there was a drought and the water was off, so I had to bring these things. And at the time, I really hated doing stuff like that, of course. But I think it kind of lends a sort of character and strength to you too. You know, you learn how to cook when you're a kid and do these things, and then when you're an adult, you go to your job, and someone's like, "How do you cook that?" You know, and you're like, "Well." So yeah, I think it builds character and it builds strength and independence, and you can do things. You know what I mean? Instead of always kind of having to. Well, getting help is good. Asking for help is very important.
Especially around stoves.
Yeah. But yeah, being able to be self-reliant was one thing that I wanted to teach like girls who were reading comics.
And is she supposed to be Afro-Caribbean?
Yes.
Also St. Vincent?
Not necessarily. Yeah, you can appeal to a governor race.
Yeah, I figure when she's cleaning, there's certain things that she's finding that may not be on everyone's palate. So
Yeah, I wink at some things, but I just try to keep it.
So what you were saying, Marguerite, actually, I really responded to. So in telling my book, Los Pirineos, the mostly true memoirs of Esperancita Gomez, is it takes place in the 1950s, and it's a collaboration between myself and my mother, and it's telling her story. So it's telling one family's immigration story, and there's a sort of weight when you are taking on, I am a Colombian American, I'm telling one family's story of immigration, but you also get that you're telling everyone's story. You now have that responsibility, and I've definitely had people come up at conventions to, either dispute things or just sort of to kind of talk about how their experience was similar or different than my family's. Yeah.
And then with like
So the 9th of April is the new book. It's within the Los Pirineos series, and this one is dealing with a day called the Bogotazo, which was on April 9th, 1948. Colombia was plunged into a civil war, and so my grandfather was a supporter of the leftist candidate, and he was assassinated on that day. And on that same day, my family went into hiding, and so it is. So your question asked about social commentary, and I don't think I was consciously trying to say this is social commentary, and yet I'm, creating a book about a family of refugees and how they got here at the same time as we have a government who is, absolutely anti-refugee and anti-immigrant. I mean, I think that's clear. So, is it social commentary? Not necessarily. I'm trying to put a realistic picture of who we are and why we come to this country as an alternative narrative.
and also add humanity back into the conversation. Exactly. When we talk about, particularly in Colombia, people often think
Narcos.
yes,
We have coffee.
excellent
and we have
series, by the way.
drugs.
Shout out to Netflix.
Yes.
Shout out to Netflix.
That is
But
a good series.
there are so many other things that are going on, but it gets reduced
To those two things.
to that, right?
That's it.
And then with the
Selena,
titles,
three things.
I'm not sure.
yeah.
I'm not sure. I mean, when I'm writing my books, I'm just writing stories that I want to read. And I think when I first started writing the Emperors, I started writing the Emperors when I was about 17 years old.
And that's the sci-fi futurism.
That's, yeah. And my intention when I started writing the Rippers was to showcase women in a different light than I've normally seen them in comics. Because some of the books that I was reading, or at least that I stumbled upon, some of them were pretty violent towards women. And I stumbled upon one manga that was extremely sexually violent towards women, and the pages just went on and on and on, and inside of me I sort of kind of raged, like, well, where's something for me? Like, this is obviously not written or made for my eyes or for me to digest. So then I just started playing with things that I enjoyed. I loved like space. It's like editing big guns. I started playing with that. And I said, well, I'm going to create a female team. I'm going to play with it and see what happens. So that's what happened with the Rippers. And then Ice Witch was a spin-off of the Rippers. And I kind of said, well, I want to see more heroes that look like me, because the Rippers is multicultural. But I wanted just to see some character that looked like me, and I played around with that, and I also played around with motherhood. We don't see mothers out there fighting, like in the media-wise, entertainment-wise. You don't see a woman with a gun strapped to her back protecting her child, besides Sarah Connor, you know, the Terminator, who I absolutely love.
Yeah.
So that's how Ice Witch was formed, and then Eating Vampires, which sort of steered around everything that I usually had done. Again, I love sci-fi, I love space, so I found myself dabbling in horror, and having this little girl being the center of that horror. This little girl sort of literally looking like me as a little half of without the sword, but yeah, she had a sword. And then just doing a full book full of women of color for that first Eating Vampires book was very empowering.
So that's all kind of cultural commentary in terms of gender issues.
Well, yeah, but I just never looked at it like
You just
that.
never saw it that way.
Yeah, I never saw it that way.
So then in terms of the creation of the projects that we introduced, what was the framework? Did you wake up one day saying, I'm gonna do this? Or did it just slowly come together as you were cleaning out the attic or closet and you
So,
yeah.
growing up, although I spoke some Spanish and, had a very close relationship with my grandparents, my family didn't really identify as Colombian. And I never got to go because at the time it was way too dangerous. And so, for a very long time I felt disconnected. And so during my graduate degree, I created illustrations for a book called 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. If you haven't read it, it should be a signed reading for the human race. It's an incredible novel. And through that novel, I started to uncover my own family's history and get back in touch with relatives and start to learn a lot about my own identity. And from that project, my mom started to tell me a little bit more about how my family got here, but the older relatives did not want to talk about it. My mom, she was all of 10 when she got here, 6 when things started to go south for my family. So very young, but my grandmother pretended nothing had happened. We knew nothing, and my grandfather didn't talk about it. So I started to get little tiny tastes of like, oh, well, we had to leave after this event. Or what event? Like, no one told me. And then one day I had gotten injured. I'd actually torn all of the ligaments in one of my ankles and was on crutches and in a boot. And I couldn't actually even make it up my stairs, and so I had to move back in with my mother and was totally depressed. And at the same time, my mom had been starting to write her memoirs. And so she just sort of left it there and said, if you feel like reading it, you can read it. And she hadn't told me anything about it. And I stayed up the entire night just, oh my God, this is where we came from? And it was this huge moment of discovery, of learning. At this point I was already 23, 24 before I found all of this out, and found out my grandfather was a revolutionary, and that's how we ended up here. I found out that my mother was expelled from school for biting her nun on the same day as the revolution started, which is how she ended up home in the first place. Wow. You can't even make it up. And so it was just this incredible page turner. And till the very end, again, spoiler, but very end where they ended up having to hide all of the children of the whole family underneath sugarcane to be able to sneak them out of the family ranch because men with guns were coming in on the other side to kill the entire family. because they were being hunted from county to county to county. So obviously, I mean, if this was your family and you had never even heard about any of this, no one was talking about it, you would have stayed up the entire night too. So, you know, when we got up the next morning and had coffee, I was like, I need to draw this. And so that was the very beginning of writing the grant for Los Pirineos. And so that was the first book.
The creative process.
It's insane.
How do we follow that?
True though.
What's going?
We're all looking at you.
The creative process. Did anybody journal or diary when you were younger, and then you went back? Because it seems like some of your work is autobiographical, some of you have some autobiographical sprinklings in yours.
Yeah, I can't, the stories is
Biting
that
in
interesting,
there.
but I'll try. So basically, you know, I grew up in this Arab household, and I grew up surrounded by everything. And you know, being Palestinian is a very political thing. It's like, no matter what, you say the P word, a lot of people, it like raises people's hackles. Like, you just can't kind of avoid it in some instances. And, you know, when I was younger, I really didn't own it. I think I really didn't like, you know, having that kind of political, I don't know what the word, like, I didn't like, yeah, like that weight happened, like, just from just being a pressure, just being myself, because, like, I'm just being whatever. And so I sort of just thought, well, I'm just gonna let other people figure it out. This gigantic thing way beyond me, I can't deal. And, you know, basically 9/11 happened, and, you know, that was a crack storm. In terms of being an Arab in this country, that was really the first wave of, you know, massive anti-Muslim, anti-Arab sentiment in this country, and I really felt it, and I felt like I had to say something. Like, I really just felt like, you know, I have a responsibility to say something, because I can, and, you know, it's absurd. So that's really the beginnings of the Hoover Girl, was like, that really just started sparking me that I'm the only one who's going to be able to say something like, Arabs have to speak up for themselves, we can't wait for the media or other people to speak up for us. We have to do it, yeah. So it eventually, I mean, it took a while for it to, you know, for me to finally just like gather everything and come out with it, but that's pretty much it.
Well, the creative process for me started, like I said, I started creating the rippers when I was 17, but before then, I was just doing my own, right? Oh my gosh. But, yeah, what I used to do was I had stacks and stacks of sketchbooks, and I would sketch out my characters, and I would start reading about 10, and I still have some of those sketchbooks in my house of all these little characters that I made, and I think when I was 17, started doing the same thing, but then started adding the writing to it, and I've always written, but I guess even though I was an avid comic book collector, for some reason I was just so enthralled with the actual drawing of everything. It wasn't like, okay, Regine, now write the story. But then as I got older, I just continued to add to the artwork, and then add the stories, and then just continue from there, learn how to make the stories, learn how to write comic book scripts, and pair everything together. That's how that happened.
In terms of writing the story, did you have an idea as to where you wanted it to end, or where you wanted the climax to be? Because there's the typical plot diagram, right?
Well,
where the exposition, rising action, falling action. So did you say like, okay, I know I want this to be a key part, and then you just built around it?
Generally, I can envision the beginning, the middle, and the end.
Okay.
But everything in and around that, I have to just flesh out and play with. Like I sort of make each, like I mentioned in the beginning will go over and over and over in my brain, over and over and over, and something will link to, oh, do this in order to get to the middle.
Right.
And then that'll go over full immigrant. And then connect to the end.
Yeah.
That's usually what happens with me.
Because I teach literature as well as comp, the one thing I always tell my students is, in many instances, it's not who that keeps you interested, it's the how. And so when you're reading a story, if the how is not interesting, you're probably going to be done. It doesn't matter how cool the character is if you're figuring out, like, how are they going to get out of this, or how is this issue going to get resolved. In terms of some of the revision process, right, for the writing, did you find, for those of you who were doing narrative prose, that you had several versions of your drafts? You know, when do you know that it's ready to go in terms of the creative process? To say, all right, the story's done, I'm not gonna look at it again. You know, like when you're giving your essays for term papers, right? You don't want to see it again, it's over, or are you shopping it around to other friends to look at your outline or your draft before it becomes this or that?
I don't know.
Or
For me, it was
you know.
kind of like, you know, those scenes from The Thing when the character would reveal itself and tentacles would just fly everywhere and it would pull things in. I would start writing and it would just be like a recursive process.
Okay.
So I would write down basic points and then I would go back and I would go back and back, and each time I would refine it and make it more detailed and think about pacing and things like that. But typically I would actually start drawing before I finish writing.
Oh, so you draw first?
No, I write
You write first?
and then I start, when I have a certain amount written, I start to draw.
Okay.
But it's usually not stitched up by then. So like even while I'm drawing, I'm like, what am I gonna do about this other thing? You know. So I don't say it's necessarily the healthiest way to go about it, but yeah, as far as writing, that's how I handle it.
Okay. And you also work with an editor, or how does that process
For
unfold?
Mouse and Ovenland, I have to run it past an editor, but they've actually been great in giving me kind of a certain amount of freedom. They don't really try to change too much.
Okay.
With the Anansi Kids, I mean, a lot of that stemmed from a kind of perverse desire to create everything on the iPad. So I really kind of hemmed myself in quite a bit, yeah.
Okay.
Like I used Notes to write out the story, and then I used
wow.
an app to do the art, and then I used another app to like put the words in and stuff like that. And so people would say, well, why don't you just print it out and do it in Illustrator? And I was like, no!
It's in here.
Yeah. So that was a very different process, but same in the sense of it was a recursive writing process, and then the drawing started a little ways after.
And for both of you, did you?
Well, I co-author.
You
with-
co-author
Yeah,
the
so it's
first
kind of a, yeah, so
Or
for
both of them?
both of them. So
Both co-author.
Charlotte in the Quiet Place, I worked with a separate author. But for Los Pirineos and for The 9th of April, those are both co-authored with my mom.
Okay.
And so she does the first draft and does all of the prose writing. And then for both books, it was a process of me getting this manuscript that's about that thick. And then editing, going back to her, definitely like, what did you do? You took out the best parts. And then so we would sort of, then there's a negotiation of going back and forth. And for the second book, we got quite a bit better at it. At this point, my mom is writing already in comics script, and so it was much easier to do the editing process. But I had I went on a residency for the second book, where I was able to workshop it with 8 other artists who were also working on memoir style work. So that was really helpful. But the script has to be finished, and I thumbnail everything first to the point where you can actually read it as thumbnails before I start drawing. And even then, I find myself redrawing pages. But yeah, for me, I try to get as much of the, narrative done before I start falling in love with any visual imagery.
And did I miss here, or did you not say about your drawing? Is it paper and pen, or are you digital?
No, I'm traditional. So I work pencil on paper, and then some of the originals are over there. I work pencil on paper, and then I ink onto watercolor paper, and I paint as a value scale.
Okay.
And so I digitally color the values that are on the watercolor paper.
Are there any art majors here? Do you understand what she's saying?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So I guess this is clear, there's technique. And in terms of your project,
Sure.
So that comic, The Little Girl, that was done pen and ink traditionally on paper. I actually did all the thumbnails on, like, I took a composition, like a 99-cent composition notebook and like notebook, because like, I love having to not be precious about it. You know, I love just taking a ballpoint pen and just like scribbling all over it. Like that just feels really good to me. So that's how I did that. The Panjikat pages, I'm going totally digital on those. So I was going to hand watercolor those at first, but now it's just going to take too much time, so now I'm digitally watercoloring them.
So I'm just asking a question. So the pages that you had in the gallery, if everyone was here for the opening, there was an incredible spread of watercolor, yes, you guys saw this, of Panjikat pages. Those were hand watercolored or digital?
Those were hand watercolored.
Okay, but
Digitally inked, printed out on watercolor paper, and hand watercolored.
You understand?
but because of time, you're going full digital?
I found great, I can talk about this later, but I found great digital brushes that look almost exactly like actual watercolor, so I'm going full digital.
And then for Laura's murals and like the piano piece that you just did.
Yeah, I paint
Which is
everywhere.
really, she painted everything. Do you have a graffiti tag name, by the way? Just
I'm
or
not
wait, we are live streaming, we don't need one.
I'm just loud now.
Okay.
I do it legally, we always get permission,
Oh.
money to do it.
Oh, okay, yeah.
It's the best way to do it.
Legally, right? You're not gonna see her on any subway cars anywhere. When you get a wall, big wall, right? Side of a building or something, how do you know where to start?
I see it, I don't know.
You visualize?
Yeah, I'm a very visual person, so
You go up to the
when
bricks.
someone is talking to me, oh, we want children and this and that, and I'm like, I just completely disconnect, like, no, you don't want that. I know what you want.
You think that's what you want.
Yeah, usually that's what happens.
Now, I've seen the process in which there's like outlining that's done and then eventually things get filled in. Is that like the normal technique for doing murals?
It's the same
It's
thing.
spray
as-
paint, right?
Yeah, well,
Special
it's the
spray
same.
paint? Is there like a special resin? Is it just plain old paint?
It's whatever you get.
Okay,
It's like in art, is whatever you get is good to draw.
okay.
If it's crayons, it's crayons. If it's doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think it's like the drawings that I have over there. That's the book that I'm working on. The first one, it has color, it's digital color, but I did them all in ink on paper. And basically, doing a mural is the same thing.
It's just on a bigger scale.
Yeah, it's just big, and it depends on your skills, and it depends on your confidence, and it depends on how big it is. Then you want to use a projector. I've never used a projector because I'm like, I can't follow scripts. I did the script for that one, like, I don't know, every time I look at it, I change things. So I can make 25 different sketches, and then whatever I put on, it's gonna be different.
Okay.
The sketches that I have. Because I was, oh no, it's recipes, I can't do twice the same thing. But that's just my personal way of working.
Okay.
So, but I usually do freehand, so I just go ahead and draw whatever on the wall. And if it's too big, then you need some kind of grid
Yeah.
or a projection or something to draw, just to have the main guidelines, and then just go for it.
Okay. And you said you get permission to draw on people's walls.
Yeah, and they pay you for it.
Yeah. Right. For anyone who missed the 5 Points, there is a 5 Points festival, arts festival
yeah.
that's coming up because they've destroyed the 5 Points. So then you get a chance to see, I guess, some of the murals resurrected that they were able to photograph into posterity. But definitely public art is something that's still very political because some say it's like a nuisance or that it's distracting.
Yeah, well, whatever. If you pay for it, if you're a big ad, it's fine to be there. But if you're doing a nice mural about something in the neighborhood, then it's distracting the people driving like that. So, but I think just bringing things like the piano, so bringing smaller things into the public, into the streets, and seeing how people react to it. They're getting used to it, and it's getting bigger, and people is more receptive to have a nice mural than to have 5 tags that they're gonna be having to square it off like every other week.
Yeah. And definitely.
That's why they pay for it.
Yeah. And I think people often have a misperception of art is that it has to always be like on a wall somewhere. And art is everywhere. It's all around you.
The first mural I
It's
did
in
in
galleries,
New York
it's
was
in
on the
museums,
floor.
but it's also on the sidewalks in the park.
Yeah, the first mural I did in New York, it was on the floor. It was the sprinkle area on the park. So it was like so ugly and dirty. So we cleaned it up and we painted it, and I did all the fishes in the Bronx River, and we've done it like several other times because you know you have to keep it up.
Yeah, because the kids are gonna everyone.
No, but water is no for weather.
We are live streaming. I don't know if there's any way to see if there are any questions.
I'm looking right now, I don't see any questions, but there may be questions from the audience.
Yeah, so I want to give digital chance. Is there any questions here in live feed for the art students? Yes.
When you started, how did you get your name out there on your regular book out there?
How did you get your name out when you started out in your career, in your craft? Right? Did I get it right?
For me, you just have to be everywhere. Apply for everything, send your drawings everywhere, put it as many places as you can so people think you're someone. Oh yeah, I've seen that name before. Oh, I've seen your drawings. That happened to me in the first mural I did with the DOT. You don't know how many times I applied. And finally I got the first one. I'm like, yes. And when I went into the meeting with all these big people in that room with all the all the big names. And one of the directors of the DOT, our program, she's like, oh yeah, I've seen your work before. You're the one that I'm like, you never gave it to me. You saw my work so many times. You know me.
Yeah.
And you didn't know you know me. But I think that's the way to go. For me, unless you have a rich uncle that can.
Can you speak a bit about, did you have anything?
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Can you speak a bit about how to protect your art when you're putting it out there? Because I've seen, especially on Instagram, for the love of screenshots, that people will repost art and not credit the artist. But then sometimes if you're putting your signature or watermark somewhere on there, it actually distracts from the art. So how do you try to get yourself publicized without, letting people get it and accounted for? Is there a way that you've mastered? Do you have digital portfolios? Some people are very protective of their work and won't post anything online because of theft.
I've thought about it because of theft, but it would essentially be, sort of committing career suicide. I mean, you have to, unless you're already really well known, you need to put your work out there, and it needs to be very, very visible. The one advice I can really give is you can get your work copyrighted for very little money. I think it's something like 24 images for like $30. And something like that. So all of my comics have been copyrighted before I put it out there, just to protect myself. I haven't honestly been quite as responsible with my illustrations, but most of them are on commission for someone else. And so essentially it would be very difficult for someone to claim that that's their work when it's already being used, with my name credited earlier. So I don't have a watermark or anything like that. But with my writing, I'm very careful to make sure that I get everything copyrighted before I put it out there into the world.
I know with Alice in Wonderland, no, not Alice in Wonderland. With the Wizard of Oz. With the Wizard of Oz between Baum and Denslow, first American fairy tale. And what was interesting with Denslow, who was the illustrator, was that on every single illustration for Dorothy the Lion or anything, he had this insignia that he inserted into everything. It was the first time that you have this intentionality of this trademarking, licensing of your intellectual property, essentially. And this is in 1900. And so, it was really fascinating when I teach children's literature, but I always thought, who would go through such efforts and lengths in 1900, right, to put the little seahorse with the den on every single thing, and he did. And so any later publications of The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, if they even use something like his illustrated, they have to credit him. Good. Which is really interesting. I saw a hand in the back.
I was copywriting at work, so we technically got 25.
Okay, so you can go to the US copyright website, and they actually make it really easy nowadays to do this. You can just do it online. You go to the US copyright website, and there's actually a basic form that you fill out, and then you can upload the images digitally, and they can just be low-res images, and like 72 dpi. And you can upload, I think it is up to 24 images at one time, and you give them $30, you pay it by credit card, and then eventually they'll send you a certificate in the mail that says, you're officially copyrighted, all these images are copyrighted by the Copyright Office.
What if it's for like colors? I have a lot of characters and it's more than 34 images.
So you do a second set.
Yeah.
So like every set, right?
Yeah.
So sets of 30.
Something like that.
24.
Or sets of 24.
Sets of 24. So if you have 50, then that means you're going through it twice. Yeah.
Do you know about trademarking?
Trademarking is a nightmare, and it's like $600.
I mean, but the thing is, like, a person can't steal your art, but they can take your concept
Yes.
if it's not trademarked.
Right.
I honestly can't speak too in depth about it, but I mean, it's like a different thing.
Yeah, trademarking is different and more expensive and time consuming. I'm speaking from experience. So, it's a whole other process, which is why some people just pay an attorney to do the search and then file the paperwork. Because otherwise it could just be a nightmare. And if the name of the characters is too similar, if there's anything, remember superhero when they tried to say superheroes trademark. There are all of these other things that happen with corporate entities, and if they have the attorney budget to pay, they could just make it really difficult for you. So it's always good to be very creative and do your research before you go paying your money, even if it's 5 cents, because you're not going to get it back if it's something that's already out there. So I did want to end on a final note of talking about girldom, because you all in your work, there's an aspect of girlhood that I think is really dope and really inspiring. And what is girldom to you? I want to end on that. Like, what does it mean to be a girl? What is girlhood, girlishness? I don't know. But there's something about what we think little girls are supposed to be like. And all of your works definitely, adolescent girls, young girls, there are things that are empowering in the work that you do that can uplift them. And so I wanted you to have a final moment to just rep for the girls.
It's about getting dirty and burping in public sometimes, and being comfortable with yourself, and having friends that mean something to you, and not because it's this person or this person is cool, but people who care about you and are there for you, and it's about having adventures and love, and eating right when you can, and eating garbage sometimes when you feel like it. Yeah. I think it's
Just being yourself. Being yourself. Just being who you are. It's a gold Afro puffs and a sword in your back. You have a cybernetic arm. Whatever you're about, whatever thing is about being yourself and not being anything but that.
Yeah, I would like doing whatever you want to do, honestly, and just being free, just be comfortable.
Spandex.
It's about not needing to be. It's about not needing to be saved.
Not needing to be saved.
No, I mean that's the thing. That's the cultural. That's the stereotype, right? Is that we need, the Disney princess that needs the damsel in distress instead of the inventor or the scientist or the hero with the sword on her back or the tough mom that is saving her kid. Like growing up, I didn't get to see strong female characters very often. I mean, there was Wonder Woman. Yes. Thank God for Linda Carter.
Yeah.
That was the one powerful, woman that was on TV for me, right? But thankfully, I had, my mom is a powerhouse. I mean, you guys have met her or something. You guys might meet her. But she is an absolute powerhouse, a total feminist, very, very bright, who, she dressed me in jeans and overalls as a little kid because she wanted to make sure that I didn't have to wear dresses unless I wanted to. Because, she spent so much of her childhood being, put into outfits that felt too tight or didn't quite work, and these giant bows on her hair, and, things that were totally uncomfortable and didn't match her personality. And, the way I was raised was go ahead, make a mud pie. You want to figure out how something works, take it apart. And there was never the sense of, you can't do this. And she, I remember her clearly telling me, never, you should never have to depend on a man, which was not negative. It wasn't you cannot depend on a man. It was you should be able to do for yourself. And so that's a lesson that I've always taken. It's something that I try to show within my own books, but that's what I feel strongest about in terms of girlhood is this sense of capability.
For me, when you will ask me when I was little, so what do you want to be when you grow up? Like, no, I don't want to grow up. That was always my answer.
Never.
Like, why would I want to grow up? Still, I don't, but
Lifetime.
God has happened. But yeah, I still feel, I don't feel like 40. It's just like, it's not there. So I don't know. In my brain, I never grew up. And in a certain way, I mean, responsibilities, whatever, yeah. But in a creative sense, in creative talking, I don't want to grow up. I don't want to be like, oh no, this is right, oh, this is wrong. For me, in art, everything is right. And art is to have fun and to understand yourself and to just be yourself. So still, I'm a little girl in my drawings.
Coloring outside the lines. And
Yeah.
using lots of glitter.
Yes.
Well, thank you very much. Oh, wait, one last.
I do have a question.
Okay.
One of the events that comes to mind is the film The Invincibles, which has characters that cross all kinds of margins. Did that have any influence on any of you when you saw it? No.
I mean, for me, it's
This sort of came out around the time where I was already starting to create comics and drawing them out and such. But I enjoyed seeing it. I enjoyed seeing this mother go get her husband and grab her kids and say, look, we gotta go and take care of business. I mean, I definitely enjoyed seeing that.
The baby was funny.
It was really funny, that little baby.
You mean The Incredibles?
The Incredibles. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
now I understand. Thank you.
Anything else? Okay. Well, thank you very much.